Imagine unlocking your store at midday, helping a customer pick out a scarf, then your phone buzzes. A jarring text appears, "I'm leaving you. I'm moving to Miami with someone else. I emptied our joint account." That moment could shatter anyone, but not Claire. For her, it was the culmination of months of whispered doubts of clues unseen by most eyes. This is the story of how betrayal became the spark for triumph. The little bell above the boutique door chimed bright and familiar. For years, that sound had been tied to Claire's pride, not just a sign of another customer walking in, but a reminder of the independence she had carved out with her own hands. But today, as the silver wrapping paper rustled beneath her fingers, that cheerful sound no longer carried peace. Because on the screen of her phone, lying on the polished counter, a short message had appeared. "I'm leaving you. I'm moving to Miami with my 20-year-old girlfriend. I've emptied our joint account." Ha ha. She read it twice. One line, cold, cruel, mocking. 12 years of marriage demolished in a single text. And yet Claire's hands didn't shake. Her voice didn't falter. She still smiled at Mrs. Peterson, her longtime customer, as she handed over a scarf wrapped in her boutique's signature silver paper. "This scarf looks wonderful on you," she said, her tone steady, professional, as if the world hadn't just collapsed beneath her feet. Only after Mrs. Peterson left the bell jingling behind her did Claire exhale a long, measured breath. She reached for her phone again, her thumb hesitating for a moment. Then she typed, "Good luck. Send." It wasn't for Mark, it was for herself. Her name was Claire Harrison, 38 years old. To the townspeople, she was simply the owner of the elegant boutique on Main Street, a small but thriving store known for its designer scarves, handbags, and dresses displayed under warm golden lights. But for Claire, the boutique wasn't just a shop. It was her life's work. Claire had grown up in a strict middle-class family. Praise was rare, criticism was constant. From an early age, she had learned how to stand on her own, to rely on discipline and determination rather than sympathy. She once dreamed of becoming a fashion designer, but reality forced her to pivot. "If I can't create my own clothes, then at least I'll choose them, display them, and sell them in my own way," she used to think. When she met Mark, she believed she had found her partner. He was charming, ambitious, quick with a joke. But ambition without persistence soon soured into bitterness. Over the years, she noticed the change. How he mocked her boutique as a little hobby, even when it was profitable. How he rolled his eyes when she stayed late balancing accounts. How his compliments dried up once her success began to outpace his. Claire often wondered, why did the man who once said he'd build dreams with me become the one who belittled them the most? The answer had arrived today in the form of a text message. And Claire knew, if ever there was a moment to stand firm, it was now. After the text, silence filled the boutique. Not the peace of calm silence, but the heavy stillness of a storm held back. "I should be crying, screaming, throwing things," a whisper in her mind said. But another voice, stronger, replied, "No, you saw this coming. You prepared. Calm means control. Control means survival." Claire had learned to regulate her emotions long before this moment. As a child, tears never softened her parents' criticism. As a young entrepreneur, panic never paid the bills. And in marriage, when Mark began to pull away, she discovered that quiet observation often gave her more power than confrontation. This was why she wasn't collapsing now. Claire's eyes roamed across her store. The shelves, the mirrors, the warm glow lighting every carefully chosen item. This wasn't the little shop Mark sneered at. This was her fortress. "You can leave. You can mock me. But you'll never take this away, she thought. Every handbag, every scarf was the result of long hours, meticulous planning sacrifices she alone had carried. It was living proof that she could build a world on her own. Most people believe betrayal is followed by tears, by rage, by collapse. But in truth, real strength often manifests in silence. Claire wasn't calm because she felt nothing. She was calm because she had prepared. She had opened separate accounts, saved records, traced the signs of his betrayal. This was emotional regulation at its finest, acknowledging the storm, but refusing to let it sweep her away. He thinks I'll crumble. He thinks I'll beg, but he's wrong. While he's laughing with her packing for Miami, I'll be calculating. He doesn't know how long I've been preparing for this day. He doesn't know that the woman he underestimated is the one who will dismantle his fantasy. A small smile touched her lips. Sharp, almost dangerous. On the surface, a woman in a boutique, wrapping scarves, arranging displays, typing good luck to her husband's text. Beneath the surface, a storm, grief, fury, heartbreak, caged in steel. That paradox was her strength. To the world she seemed calm, professional, maybe even indifferent, but beneath she was already plotting, already arming herself. That is the nature of a silent storm. You don't hear it, you don't see it, but when it breaks, it changes everything. The sun dipped outside the boutique window, shadows stretching across the street. Claire watched people passing by, couples, laughing children tugging at their parents, teenagers glued to their phones. Life moved on. She whispered to herself so softly, only she could hear, "Good luck, Mark. You're going to need it." Then she turned, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. The storm was coming, but she wasn't afraid. For the first time in months, Claire felt something she hadn't expected: clarity. The first time Claire noticed the discrepancy, it was subtle. Too subtle, perhaps, for anyone else to care. A late-night withdrawal at an ATM downtown, time-stamped at 11:47 p.m. Mark had told her he was working late, but his paycheck hadn't grown. His projects hadn't expanded, and his eyes carried the faint gleam of secrets. At first, she brushed it off. It's probably nothing. Maybe gas. Maybe he grabbed a late dinner. But then came another and another. Small amounts at first. $80, $120. Then $350 at a place called the Royal Palm Lounge. She'd never been there, but the name alone suggested velvet booths, dim chandeliers, cocktails with prices that could fund her boutique's weekly window display. Claire's boutique thrived on details, colors, textures, receipts meticulously filed in labeled envelopes. Her life was one of order, of precision. Mark, by contrast, lived with the sloppiness of someone who believed details didn't matter. And in that sloppiness, he betrayed himself. It wasn't just the money. It was the phone. The passwords that shifted overnight, the way he angled the screen away when she walked by. It was the gym routine. Mark had never cared for weights before, but suddenly he was religious about it. Protein shakes lined up in the fridge, shirts shrinking against his midlife belly, haircuts, too frequent, cologne, too sharp. And then the laughter. Not his laughter, it was hers. Claire remembered it vividly, the Christmas party at his office, when Melissa, the new receptionist, laughed too hard at jokes that weren't funny, her hand lingering too long on Mark's sleeve. Claire had smiled politely, the perfect wife, while every nerve in her body whispered, "Something is wrong." The turning point came on a night that smelled of rain. Mark had claimed he was closing late at the office. Claire, exhausted from rearranging a new shipment of handbags, had gone to check the mail. Tucked inside the credit card statement was a crisp slip dinner for $214, the Royal Palm. Her eyes traced the line again and again. A part of her wanted to crumple it, throw it away, Pretend it hadn't arrived. Pretend the lie hadn't crystallized into paper. But another part of her, the part that had been watching recording, silently cataloging, smoothed the slip and placed it in a folder. She named the folder Evidence. That same week, Claire opened her own bank account at a small branch across town. Not their usual bank, the one where Mark might casually log in and see balances. No, this was separate, a fortress of her own. The banker, a young man with eager eyes, had asked, "Do you want to make it a joint account with your husband?" Claire had smiled calm and polite. "No, just me." It felt like breathing clean air after months of suffocation. And when Mark, ever careless, suggested a week later that they should combine accounts to simplify things, she had smiled again, wide and agreeable. "Of course," she had said. "That makes perfect sense." Inside, though, her mind whispered, "Merge all you want, Mark. Merge into the illusion. I've already built my escape hatch." She remembered that Tuesday vividly. Rain lashed against the boutique's glass windows, leaving trails like veins of silver. Customers were sparse. Most preferred to stay home on nights like this. Claire sat in her office at the back laptop, opened her phone, casting a soft glow. She logged into her private account her whispered plan. Money moved silently like soldiers into formation. Each transfer was small, unnoticeable, just enough to avoid suspicion. $200 here, $500 there, always from her boutique profits, never from the joint account. She leaned back, listening to the rain drum against the glass. A bitter smile tugged at her lips. If he wants to merge, she whispered aloud, "Fine. Let him think nothing's wrong." And in that moment, Claire realized something. She wasn't just surviving her marriage. She was outsmarting it. But none of this was easy. Every quiet calculation carried the weight of grief. What happened to us, she would ask herself late at night, lying in bed, while Mark showered for the second time that day, the scent of unfamiliar perfume clinging faintly to his collar. Did I miss the moment it all changed? Was there a night when he looked at me and simply stopped loving me? Or was it gradual affection leaking out like air from a punctured tire? These questions haunted her. And yet, through the sorrow, she moved with precision. Every folder, every screenshot, every account transfer was a shield against the collapse she knew was coming. By day, she wore her mask perfectly. The loyal wife, the professional boutique owner. Customers never saw the storm brewing behind her smile. Friends never heard the sharp edge of doubt in her thoughts. Even Mark didn't notice because he didn't care to look. He saw what he wanted, a wife too busy with scarves and handbags to notice his affairs. A woman distracted, harmless. And that was his greatest mistake. What Claire was doing had a name: anticipatory coping. It is the act of preparing emotionally and practically before the crisis arrives. Where others wait to be blindsided, she prepared. She built financial walls, collected evidence, rehearsed in her mind the day when everything would collapse. This wasn't paranoia. It was foresight. And it gave her something priceless. When betrayal finally arrived, she didn't fall apart. She stood ready. Sometimes, late at night, she'd sit by the window with a glass of wine. The city lights blurred against the glass, rain pattering softly. She'd let herself feel the ache, then the loss of the man she thought she had, the death of the marriage she once dreamed of. But then she would look at the evidence folder on her desk. She'd picture her secret account growing steadily, quietly, and she'd remember, this is not the end of me. This is the preparation for something greater. And that thought, repeated like a prayer, carried her through. The betrayal had not yet exploded. Mark was still laughing too loud at Melissa's jokes, still buying shirts too tight, still lying about working late. But Claire was no longer the unsuspecting wife. She was the strategist, the observer, the woman who smiled in silence while quietly pulling bricks out from under the house of lies her husband had built. And when the collapse came, she would not be buried in rubble. She would be standing on solid ground, watching it fall. The phone buzzed again, its vibrations rattling against the boutique counter like an insistent knock. Claire stared at the glowing screen, her chest tightening, with a mixture of rage and grim anticipation. Don't bother begging. You're not getting any younger. At least you have your little shop to keep you busy. Her breath caught, not in shock, but in recognition. Every word was precisely the kind of cruelty she'd expected. Mark's talent for condescension had matured with age. It was no longer veiled in half-hearted politeness, but delivered with blunt cruelty. Claire read the text again, her lips pressing into a thin line. The words, "Your little shop," cut deep, but not in the way Mark intended. They didn't belittle her. They sharpened her. My little shop, she thought, glancing around at the boutique, the warm light spilling over polished wood floors. Designer scarves folded like treasures, handbags perched like works of art. The same little shop that has kept us afloat. The shop you mocked when it demanded long hours. The shop you never understood. You think it's little Mark? Then watch how it saves me while you drown. She could have typed back, could have unleashed fury through her thumbs, typing the truth she had collected for months, the receipts, the late-night withdrawals, the laughter of a young receptionist who didn't understand she was a placeholder in a tired pattern. But she didn't. Her fingers hovered above the keys, then pulled back. Instead, Claire reached for her contacts. She scrolled down until she found the name she'd saved months ago, when intuition had guided her to consult a professional long before the collapse. Lawyer L. Carter. Her thumb pressed call. When the line clicked open, Claire's voice carried no tremor, only resolve. It's time. On the other end, Ms. Carter's voice was calm, measured, almost expectant. I thought it might be, she said. The papers are ready. We'll file first thing tomorrow. Do it, Claire replied. Her words felt like steel sliding into place. For the first time in hours, she allowed herself to sit. The boutique was quiet, the only sound the distant hum of traffic outside and the ticking of the brass clock she'd hung near the register. Each tick felt like a drumbeat marking the start of something irreversible. Her phone buzzed again, another message from Mark. Melissa, and I leave tomorrow. I'll send for my things later. Claire's jaw tightened. She opened her banking app, scrolling through the charges she already knew she'd find. There it was, 2 first-class tickets to Miami, hotel reservations at the Royal Palm, all charged to their joint card. The anger that rose in her chest was sharp, but it didn't overtake her. Instead, she picked up the phone again, this time dialing the number on the back of her credit card. Mrs. Harrison speaking, she said when the representative answered. I need to report fraudulent charges and cancel a card immediately. The rep's tone was professional, but softened with empathy as Claire listed the purchases. 2 airline tickets, a hotel booking, both made today. Do you have documentation of the fraud? The rep asked. Claire almost laughed. Yes. Text messages from my husband admitting he used our joint card to book travel with his girlfriend after draining our joint account. There was a pause. When the rep spoke again, her voice carried a trace of satisfaction. "We'll cancel those immediately, Mrs. Harrison. The charges will not stand." Claire leaned back in her chair, her pulse finally slowing. She imagined Mark and Melissa arriving at the airport tomorrow, bright-eyed with fantasies of beaches and cocktails, only to find their tickets invalid, their hotel room canceled. The thought wasn't bitter. It was cleansing. She set the phone down and stared out the boutique window. The street lamps flickered against the rain-slick pavement outside. Customers had long gone, and the shop smelled faintly of cedarwood polish and leather handbags. Her chest still hurt, but it was no longer the sharp sting of betrayal. It was the ache of release, of finally doing something instead of standing still. "You thought I'd beg, Mark. You thought you could humiliate me into silence, but begging is for those who are powerless, and I am not powerless." The words played in her head like a mantra. The memory came unbidden. Years ago, early in their marriage, they had fought over money. Mark had taken out a loan without telling her, nearly jeopardizing the down payment for her boutique's lease. She remembered crying, then begging him to fix it, to explain, to promise her it wouldn't happen again. And he had looked at her with pity disguised as affection, saying, "You worry too much, Claire. Let me handle it." She had begged once. Never again. Now, instead of tears, she had evidence. Instead of pleas, she had a lawyer on standby. Instead of powerlessness, she had agency. This was what psychologists would call reframing, the ability to take a situation that could be defined by trauma and redefine it through action. For Claire, every documented receipt, every fraudulent charge reported, every phone call made was more than paperwork. It was empowerment. Her boutique wasn't just her livelihood, it was her fortress. And her lawyer wasn't just a professional. She was her weapon. Another buzz, another text. "Melissa understands me in ways you never could. You'll be fine. Maybe you'll even find someone more your age. Already told my family it's nobody's fault. We grew apart." Claire stared at the message, the corner of her mouth twitching in something close to laughter. Nobody's fault. He had drained their accounts, flaunted his affair, and now positioned himself as a victim of inevitability. She screenshotted the message, sliding it into her growing evidence folder. "Keep talking, Mark," she whispered. "Every word you type is another nail in your coffin." For many, betrayal paralyzes. It leaves people stuck in loops of why and how. But Claire was discovering something else. Action itself was therapy. Every step she took, calling her lawyer, canceling the charges, archiving the texts, transformed her role from victim to strategist. It was what psychologists call agency restoration. When someone tries to strip you of control, the path to healing lies in reclaiming that control. And Claire wasn't just reclaiming it, she was wielding it. The boutique lights dimmed as she prepared to close for the night. She locked the register, drew the curtains, and stood in the center of her shop. A storm raged outside, wind rattling the glass. But inside, Claire felt still. She poured herself a glass of the Bordeaux she had been saving for a special occasion. She lifted the glass and whispered, "This qualifies." The wine was rich, bold, and tasted like triumph in its earliest form. By the time she crawled into bed that night alone in the house she had inherited and wisely kept in her name, Claire felt the ache of betrayal shift into something new. Not joy, not yet, but certainty. She knew the storm wasn't over. Mark would rage when he discovered his canceled flights. He would call, he would blame, he would scramble. But she also knew this: she had already taken the first blow, and it hadn't destroyed her. it had missed, and in the silence of her bedroom, lit only by the faint glow of her phone screen, she thought one final time before sleep. The blow wasn't mine to take. The blow is his, and it's only just beginning. The courthouse looked no different from any other courthouse Claire had ever passed, but never entered a cube of beige stone windows reflecting a dull, heavy sky. The morning was brisk, her breath fogging as she climbed the wide steps, heels striking a deliberate rhythm, slow, steady, unafraid. In her hand was a leather portfolio, dark espresso edges, worn from use. Inside lay copies of everything: texts, bank statements, the deed to her grandmother's house, the boutique's corporate filings. Paper armor. Attorney Carter was waiting in the atrium beneath the echo of footsteps and hushed whispers. "There you are," she said, her smile snapping into place as if she had saved it for this very moment. Navy suit hair, pinned neat eyes sharp and ready. "How hard is he going to push?" Claire asked softly. Carter's glance dropped to the portfolio, then back. "He's already done the pushing for us. We don't prove hurt today. We prove pattern. And Claire?" She tilted her head. "You're ready." "I'm ready." The phrase fit inside Claire's chest like a key in a lock. Inside, the courtroom felt colder. Wooden paneling the flag behind the bench the judge raised like a small mountain. Judge Alvarez Stern and carved-faced reading glasses balanced on her nose. A court reporter's hands rested over a steno machine like a pianist hovering over keys. Mark was already there. He sat at the respondent's table like a man squeezed into clothes that didn't fit. The blazer clung awkwardly to his shoulders. His foot jittered, then stilled when he caught himself. Beside him, Attorney Devlin flipped through a binder with garish tabs. Behind them, Barbara Mark's mother clutched a tissue, her face pinched with worry and embarrassment. Melissa was absent. Claire didn't care why. Mark glanced up when the door latched shut behind Claire and Carter. He smirked, then faltered when he saw the portfolio. Something flickered in his eyes, fear or defiance. She didn't bother to name it. "He thought I'd come empty-handed. He thought I'd bring only my throat, not my spine." The bailiff called out Harrison versus Harrison. Judge Alvarez lifted her head. "We're here today on an emergency motion for asset preservation and preliminary relief. Counsel appearances, please." Carter rose. "Lauren Carter for the petitioner, Your Honor." Devlin stood smoothing his tie. "Michael Devlin for the respondent, Your Honor." "Thank you," the judge said. "Ms. Carter, you may proceed." Carter didn't start with texts or hotel receipts. She started with time. "Your Honor, this is a 12-year marriage. Throughout it, my client maintained separate property. Last week, the respondent emptied the parties' joint account, charged an out-of-state trip with his girlfriend on their joint credit card, then bragged about it in writing. We don't seek anything extraordinary today. We seek stabilization, freeze joint accounts, order return of funds, enjoin misuse of joint credit, and preliminarily confirm that the inherited home and incorporated boutique, both maintained as separate, are not to be touched during dissolution." She laid each point like tiles, methodical, undeniable. "Do you have evidence?" the judge asked. "Yes, Your Honor." Carter handed over exhibits. Exhibit A: text messages from Mr. Harrison admitting to draining accounts and charging travel with his girlfriend. Exhibit B: bank statements. Exhibit C: credit card statements and fraud chargebacks. Exhibit D: deed to the house held solely in my client's name since inheritance. Exhibit E: boutique incorporation documents and tax filings showing clean separation. The judge lifted Exhibit A. Even from her table, Claire recognized the printed ha-ha. A small, private flame flickered in her chest. "See it. See what I had to read in my own kitchen under that ridiculous pendulum clock. Devlin shot to his feet. Your Honor, we dispute labeling this as fraud. The parties were still married. Judge Alvarez raised a hand. Mr. Devlin, the question isn't whether a marriage existed. The question is whether joint funds were spent for non-marital purposes and whether the estate was harmed. Do you have authority that supports airfare with a girlfriend as legitimate marital use? Devlin faltered. We contend it was a lapse of judgment during a separation. There was no separation when he sent these texts, Carter cut in. And even if there were lapses, don't entitle one spouse to raid joint accounts? The bank chargebacks confirm that. The judge nodded. The bank reversed the charges. And you seek return of withdrawn funds. Yes, Your Honor, Carter said. Devlin coughed. Some of the funds were for ordinary expenses. Airfare to Miami isn't ordinary, Carter said softly. Yet her words cut like steel. Hasoras. The judge moved on to the house. Carter presented the deed. Inherited property recorded pre-marriage. No gift, no quitclaim, no transmutation. We also have texts where he pressured her to add him to prove commitment. The judge's expression soured. Devlin tried. There was commingling repairs from joint funds. Routine maintenance isn't transmutation, Carter countered. And every expense was reimbursed from her separate account the same cycle. Ledger included. Judge Alvarez turned to Claire. Mrs. Harrison, did you maintain this separation? Yes, Your Honor, Claire said. Her voice rang solid like a knock on oak. I never added him to the deed, never used the house as collateral. I kept clean books. The texts where he asked me to add him are in evidence, and the business also separate, Claire said. I incorporated before marriage. I managed it. Profits went back into the business or into my separate account. We didn't commingle. Devlin leapt. Your Honor, he contributed moral support. The judge cut him off. Moral support is valuable in life. It isn't recognized on a balance sheet. A ripple of laughter passed through the gallery. Devlin reddened. Judge Alvarez closed the file. Joint accounts are frozen effective immediately. Mr. Harrison is ordered to return funds withdrawn within 48 hours. Exclusive temporary possession of the residence to Mrs. Harrison. Joint credit is restricted to necessities only. Further misuse will be sanctioned. Discovery deadlines will be set. She looked directly at Mark. Mr. Harrison, don't test this order. You're not scoring points. Mark's head dropped, hands trembling. In Claire's mind, a door opened into a bright, empty room waiting for her to arrange her future. In the hallway, Barbara stepped forward, eyes wet. I'm sorry, dear. I never thought Mark would. Claire softened her voice. I know, Barbara. But after a point, he raised himself. Barbara nodded miserably, twisting her tissue. Carter led Claire to a bench under a tall window. You did well. He didn't. That's to your advantage. Claire laughed, startling herself. I didn't do anything. You held your ground, Carter said. That's everything in here. Mark leaned against a pillar outside, arms crossed, pretending casual. So that's it, he sneered. You play the victim, get the house, the cards, the whole poor Claire routine. I didn't play anything, Claire said. You wrote your own script. I just brought it to the right stage. Cute. Must feel nice, hiding behind a lawyer. I'm not hiding, she said. I'm revealing. He stepped closer, voice lowered once the tone that used to make her shrink. She didn't. You planned this? He hissed. You wanted out. She thought of the evidence folder of the nights she prepared silently. No, she said. I prepared for what you started. You'll regret it. He spat. Her smile was small, honest. I already regret what I tolerated. That won't happen again. Barbara pulled at his sleeve. Let's go. He let her steer him, muttering about biased judges, twisted lawyers, nobody understanding him. There it is, Claire thought. The language of those who can't hold their own mirror. Later that afternoon, Claire sat in a cafe near the courthouse, eating a turkey sandwich latte steaming beside her. A text buzzed from the bank. We confirm freeze order enforcement. Funds secured. She chuckled, slid the phone aside. For the first time in days, she tucked the portfolio all the way down in her tote. The armor has done its job. Now it can rest. Back at the boutique, the bell chimed bright and familiar, uncomplicated. The shop smelled of cedar and leather. A customer stepped in hesitantly. I heard about what happened. I just wanted to say you're brave. Claire smiled. Thank you. Would you like to see the new scarves they just came in? The boutique returned to what it had always been, a place where women could see themselves clearly and like what they saw. That evening, Claire stood in her office. On the wall hung a framed copy of Mark's text, "Have fun with your little shop." Beneath it, she taped the judge's order, "Accounts frozen. Funds to be returned in 48 hours. Residence exclusive to petitioner." 2 documents, 2 voices, one trying to diminish her, the other affirming justice. Claire whispered to herself, "The tango is over. Now it's my dance alone." The weeks after the courtroom felt like a season change, though the calendar still read late summer. Claire's boutique, once simply a shop on Main Street, had become something else, a gathering place, a story told in fabric and whispers. She hadn't planned it that way. She had intended only to survive, to rebuild, to put one foot in front of the other. But survival had a way of catching attention, and her story, half rumor, half admiration, spread through town, like ivy finding new walls to climb. It began in subtle tones. Customers lingered longer than usual, running their fingers over scarves, asking questions they already knew the answers to, pausing as though they wanted permission to bring up what everyone had heard. "Is it true?" one woman finally whispered at the register, clutching a leather clutch like a secret. "That he drained the account." Claire didn't flinch. She simply wrapped the bag in silver paper and handed it over. "It's true that some men underestimate women. And it's true that women survive." The customer's eyes lit up, not with gossip, but with solidarity. "Well, I'll take the matching wallet too." Sales climbed, not because of pity, but because women wanted to buy a piece of the narrative. Each scarf, each handbag became more than fashion. It became symbolic. 2 weeks later, Claire sat in a real estate office across from a landlord with tired eyes and too many keys on his belt. On the table lay a lease for a second storefront across town, larger, with wide windows, that begged for creative displays. "You're sure you want to expand this quickly?" he asked. "Most people, after a divorce?" Claire signed with a steady hand. "Most people aren't me." He nodded slowly, as if realizing she wasn't asking for permission, she was stating fact. Back at the boutique, Claire held a small staff meeting with 3 new hires, young women with bright eyes and sharper instincts. "I want this place to be more than sales," she told them. "I want customers to walk in and feel stronger when they leave. We're not just selling accessories, we're selling a reminder you can reclaim your life." The team nodded, scribbling notes, one of them tearing up slightly. Claire didn't expect tears. She expected excellence. But she also knew what it meant when someone felt seen. At night, Claire sat at her desk laptop, glowing, mapping out the boutique's online store. She filmed short videos, just her hands unwrapping scarves, her voice describing textures. No melodrama, no mention of Mark. But viewers knew. The comments filled with encouragement. "This woman is a powerhouse. I don't even need a new bag, but I'm buying one to support her." Proof that elegance is the best revenge. Orders rolled in from across the country. Boxes stacked by the door, shipping labels like small promises headed outward. Meanwhile, gossip about Mark simmered like background music. People heard he was living back in his childhood room, that Melissa had moved on, that he'd tried to claim age discrimination at work only to be laughed out of HR. Every tale made its way back to Claire, not because she sought them out, but because customers whispered them between racks of clothing. "Did you hear?" one woman said, draping a shawl over her shoulders. "He's driving his mom's old sedan now." Claire nodded politely, never adding fuel. Yet inside, she recognized the irony. His decline had become her marketing magnet. He had wanted to diminish her. Instead, he had branded her without realizing it. It wasn't just commerce, it was psychology. Women identified with Claire's quiet strength. They saw in her not narcissistic triumph, but controlled reclamation. She hadn't burned his clothes on the lawn or screamed outside his office. She had filed documents, presented receipts, walked into court with dignity. Psychologists call it resilience contagion, the way one person's calm recovery can inspire others to believe they too can recover. Every scarf sold, every handbag wrapped in silver paper, carried that contagion out the door. One rainy Friday, a customer leaned in at checkout, lowering her voice like a conspirator. "You know," she said, sliding her credit card across the counter, "this isn't just a handbag, it's revenge through brilliance." Claire met her gaze. For a heartbeat, she considered dismissing it, laughing it off. But instead, she simply said, "Then carry it with pride." The woman left, grinning, bags swinging at her side like a banner. Soon, local bloggers picked up the story, "Boutique Owner Turns Betrayal into Brand." Photos of Claire's window displays appeared online, framed with captions about empowerment and renewal. A regional magazine requested an interview. In it, Claire didn't mention Mark once. She spoke only of preparation, of foresight, of the value of keeping personal and business finances separate. The interviewer asked, "Do you think women see you as a role model?" Claire paused, considering. "I hope they see themselves. I'm not the exception. I'm the reminder." Late at night, when the shop was quiet and the new hires had gone home, Claire would stand in the middle of the boutique and close her eyes. She remembered the woman who once sat by the window with wine, whispering that survival wasn't the end. Now survival had transformed into reinvention. The boutique wasn't a shield anymore. It was a beacon. "I thought I had lost," she whispered to herself. "But I've only begun." Weeks after the courtroom tango, Claire's world was unrecognizable in the best way. 2 boutiques thriving, an online store buzzing, customers who came not only for fashion but for affirmation. The scars remained texts framed on her office wall, memories she didn't erase, but they no longer defined her. They simply reminded her of the ground she had walked across to arrive here. And as she locked up one evening, the silver paper crinkling under her hands, she thought of the phrase that had followed her from checkout whispers to headlines: "Revenge through brilliance." She smiled. Maybe it was revenge. Maybe it was brilliance. Or maybe finally it was simply hers. The boutique's bell still chimed the same way it had a decade earlier, bright silver, unassuming. But the space it echoed into had multiplied. Not just one shop anymore, but 5. 5 boutiques spread across the state like markers of resilience. Each store bore the same signature touch, soft lighting polished wood scarves, folded with precision handbags perched like art. Claire walked through the flagship store heels, quiet against the hardwood. Employees moved about with efficiency, unpacking new shipments, chatting with customers, smiling the way people do when they're proud of where they work. 30 employees now, she thought. 30 livelihoods tied to what Mark once called a little shop. Her office was tucked behind the flagship, a sanctuary of order. On the wall hung 2 frames. The first, a printed screenshot of Mark's old text, sharp black letters on white paper. "Have fun with your little shop." The second, her most recent business award gleaming beneath glass, the plaque engraved Entrepreneur of the Year Innovation in Retail. The juxtaposition was deliberate. Claire didn't keep the text to torture herself. She kept it as proof of distance traveled. Proof that a cruel dismissal could be transformed into fuel. "I wasn't broken," she whispered sometimes, standing in front of the wall. "I was forged." Word about Mark still drifted back to her, though she never asked. People talked. They said he was still living in his childhood room, the posters of a football team long defunct still curling on the wall. They said he worked odd jobs, nothing steady always, with an excuse about unfair bosses or bad timing. Claire rarely reacted when she heard. Sometimes she felt a pang of pity, but it quickly dissolved. Choices had brought him there, and choices had brought her here. 2 roads diverged, she thought, and for once I didn't follow. I built my own. It was the 5-year anniversary of the flagship boutique. The store was transformed for the night. Champagne flutes lined the counter. The mannequins dressed in limited edition scarves, music low and elegant. Employees gathered, friends and customers filled the space. Journalists from a regional lifestyle magazine hovered near the back. Claire stood at the center, glass in hand. She was older now, 43, but stronger, sharper. Her hair, once worn, tied back in hurried knots, now flowed in sleek waves. Confidence had reshaped her posture. Resilience had softened her smile. She lifted her glass. The room quieted. "I want to thank all of you," she began, her voice steady, resonant. "When this boutique first opened, people thought it was just a shop. Some even called it a hobby. But look around you. 5 boutiques, 30 employees, customers across the country. This is more than retail, it's a story." She paused, the words building not just in her throat, but in her chest. "My story isn't about how I was broken. It's about how I became unbreakable. I didn't just fight back, I built forward. And if there's one lesson I can leave you with tonight, it's this. Never let someone else's small vision define your capacity for greatness. Let their doubt be your fuel. Let your resilience be your legacy." The crowd erupted, glasses raised. Employees cheered, customers clapped, a few teared up. Later that night, after the guests had gone, Claire sat alone in her office. The champagne had dulled into warmth in her veins. She stared at the 2 frames again, Mark's text, the award. Her eyes softened. "I could have let you define me, Mark," she thought. "I could have shriveled under your laughter, begged under your cruelty. But I didn't. I kept my records. I made my calls. I built my walls of paper and turned them into foundations of stone." She leaned back, exhaling deeply. "And now look." The following month, Claire was featured in a national magazine, From Betrayal to Brilliance. How one woman built an empire out of resilience. The photo shoot captured her in the flagship boutique, light streaming across racks of scarves. The interviewer asked, "Do you ever think about him?" Claire smiled faintly. I think about choices. His choices, my choices. His led him backward. Mine built forward. That's all that matters. Psychologists wrote articles analyzing her story. They called her an example of transformative resilience, not just surviving trauma, but converting it into generative energy. Her boutiques became case studies in business schools. Students dissected her foresight in separating finances, her use of documentation as armor, her ability to brand survival into strength. Claire read some of the articles and laughed softly. I didn't do it to make theory, she thought. I did it to breathe, to live. But she also knew once you live it, others can learn it. And that, too, was legacy. On the night after the anniversary, Claire returned home, still the house her grandmother had left her, still her sanctuary. She poured a glass of Bordeaux, the same vintage she had once sipped alone in defiance. Now it tasted different. Not bitter. Not triumphant. Just full. She stood by the window, city lights glowing against the dark. The reflection of her older self looked back, wiser eyes, calmer mouth. She whispered into the glass, I didn't just survive you, Mark. I transcended you. Years had passed. 5 boutiques, 30 employees, national features. The framed text still hung on her office wall, not as a wound, but as a trophy of perspective. Beneath it gleamed her latest award. The message was clear, written not in ink, but in life. She was unbreakable. And as she prepared for the next morning staff meetings, shipment arrivals, a possible 6th boutique location, Claire smiled. Her story was no longer about revenge. It was about resilience, reinvention, and legacy. A legacy that began with a text meant to belittle, and ended with a woman who built an empire out of brilliance.